Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Black Crow Gaming's World Eater Tactics videos. I'm Sam. I'm Black Crow Gaming's World Eater specialist. I live and breathe World Eaters. I'm a mod on the World Eaters Discord. I play um, World Eaters in lots of tournaments all over the UK. And I've been doing reasonably well with them. So I'm here to talk about list building. So I've got a few different lists prepared. Some of these are ones that I've grabbed from the community, people who are doing well in tournaments. I will be shouting out whose lists they are. Some of them are written by me, and let's be honest, the list size are not, the we don't have a huge roster of units to choose from. So it's quite likelihood that if you've written a bunch of competitive World Eater lists that you'll probably have some have written a list the same as mine at some point, hopefully. And if not, then maybe it's something to look into and assess like the reasons behind. I mean, I'm going to try and explain the reasons why I think, why I've put things in the lists and why I don't have other things. But yeah, if you want me to see you go through all of the different data sheets that I think are important to know, the first episode in this series goes through all the different data sheets. I won't be going through the data sheets, but I will be talking about the units. So if we're going to talk about competitive World Eater lists, um, we need to first, I mean, like there is one person in the community that I imagine most people know and has written wrote a list that almost a year old now. That's been tweaked ever so slightly throughout the year, but that would be Anthony Vanella, a Team USA player, fantastic player, does really well with World Eaters in teams events. Specifically for the past year, he's focused very much on teams events. He has used this list in singles quite successfully last year at LGT. Let me just pop the list up now. So, assuming I haven't made any mistakes writing this list down, this is the list. Now, this is the most Berserker heavy list on here. Um, I mean, the Berserker unit, I think, is by itself not a good data sheet, but the characters are so fantastic that they sort of level that out. So, Massive Executions with Glaive, in my opinion, is the first one you want with Berserkers, and then the second one being Khan. And then if you really want to put more Berserkers in, then you're looking at another Massive Executions at that point. But I think the two is really what your the limit. Now, the interesting part about this list is you've got these, a unit of 10 Berserkers and a unit of 5 Berserkers. They've both got a Rhino, so they're going off separately and doing their own things. It's which one do you put with which, right? So there is no, the Master Executions always goes with the 5 and Khan always goes with the 10. It purely is matchup specific, which makes the list a little bit more hard to pilot when if you're just picking it off the the internet and not really getting experience with it. So I do recommend, if you're going to be doing this build, put some practice in, try experimenting with which leader you want leading which unit. Generally, the purpose of it, if you think about it this way, is Khan and the 10-man have that more reroll support and are better at chewing through bigger units and bigger things. Whereas if you're worried about your Master Executions dying and you really need him to get into the connect, or you really need that fight first on the bigger unit, then you'll want that. So there's even within matchups, right? There might be times where you run one with the 10-man against one type of list from a certain codex, and then a different one depending on what the enemy or the opponent has. So that's, I think, the most interesting tech choice within this list. This is also list is sort of shy on Eightbound. It's obviously got 12 in total, 3 and a 6 of Exalted, and a 3 of normal Eightbound. Personally, I find 3 of normal is just not enough. Like, I really enjoy using those as little skirmishing units, and they massively, the force multiplier aspect of giving those reroll ones to wound is really, really great. But obviously, Khan gives that to his unit anyway. So there's a little bit of balancing act there as well. Like Khan doesn't need Eightbound near him. It doesn't really benefit his squad. Those rhinos are scoring units after a great little action monkeys and just holding objectives. You've got jackals, you've got spawn, so you've got the screening units. So like when we're looking at a list, we're going down, we've got like the hammer units, like you've got the big 6 exalted Eightbound, you've got Angron, you've got massive executions with a 10-man or Khan with a 10-man. These are all like the hammer units of this list, and it's got good potential with those. And then you've got like the skirmishing units that can do the damage, but they're not necessarily going to just run through your opponent's army by themselves. Obviously, all combined, they will. So like spawn tanky units to sit on objective and do actions. Like they're surprisingly hard to shift. And then you've got jackals to screen, sticky objectives, fight those early units. If they're using scouts to block, a good unit of jackals thrown into them can usually clear out that scout squad. And then that's great for you. You've got Lord Invocatus running around solo. It's a very, very rare case you might consider putting him with the 6 Exalted Eightbound purely for that fallback and charge if you feel like you're going to be locked in a lot. I've done it like once ever. But yeah, so this list is I is this is like the standard list. This is the list that I think everyone knows and almost like comes to expect to see across the table if they see World Eaters. Although I think it's becoming less and less popular recently. We've had a bit more variation thrown in there. I think people are being a bit more creative as we're developing longer, into using this index. But this was the first like list that sort of took off for World Eaters. Effectively, like I say, it's a year old now. There's been times where a Jackal squad's been dropped, or a character's been swapped around, or whatever. Sometimes it's had the Juglord with favored, right? We've it's But this is a solid list in my opinion. It's got a good healthy amount of scoring, a good healthy amount of killing units, for like hammer units. So I think it's a good sort of starting point to talk about it. But like that's if you want to go berserkers, this is the way you want to go. Um, Me personally, I'm not a fan of having 15 berserkers. So the list I've been using for the majority of this year is this one. Now, that doesn't look like a huge difference, but I'll highlight the differences. We've got one less Rhino, we've not got Khan, we've not got 5 berserkers. But for that, we have an extra unit of 8-bound. Then we have the Lord on Juggernaut with favored. So the favored aspect means that it's just more consistent that you're going to get that advance and charge when you need it. And if you don't end up needing it, that reroll, then later on it helps you revive Angron. You have slightly less scoring in this list. You don't have that second Rhino, and you don't have as much OC because you don't have those 5 extra Berserkers. But generally, still got similar levels of screening. That extra 8-bound unit I like to use as a skirmishing unit in the sense of like, yes, I don't have as much scoring to sit on objectives, but usually the 8-bound will kill something off an objective and be sat on it. So that's, and like having the 2 units innately scouting means that I can like sort of scout on flanks. So if they block off the center, I've still got a couple of units that can scout on flanks. They're very fast. That reroll support is great. Like getting them near the 6 exalted 8-bound or the or Angron on the like go turn when they go in is it can do wonders for the rerolls. And same for the berserkers because they don't have Khan, they don't have the reroll ones to wound. Massive Executions is very solo in that unit. It gives them self rerolls against characters, but there's no other innate rerolls. So they benefit a lot more from being near Angron and being near 8-bound. So having that extra unit of 8-bound, I really, really like having. I wish I could squeeze in more Exalted 8-bound. But this is the way it works because that's the other thing is if the next set of lists don't have any berserkers in. They don't have any Master Executions that are Berserkers. The Master Executions with Glaive has been like a staple point for a lot of lists for a long time, but we're actually starting to see them become less popular and more Eightbound focused lists or some other things, which I'll show shortly. But the um, interesting part about this is like I see the meta being quite melee focused, and we're now talking about taking out our fight first unit, and I find it really hard to not to leave home without that fight first unit. So this is my current list. This is what I'm taking to tournament this weekend, and yeah, it's the. I don't think we need the master executions with Glaive, but it's not just as simple. Like for me, it's just I miss him too much when I don't have him, especially in those melee versus melee matchups. But I have been having a lot of experience where my berserkers they'll go in, they'll do their damage, they'll kill something, but then they just die straight off the cut. Everyone's got some way of dealing with 10 berserkers without letting them, blood surge into them. So it's very rare that I'm seeing much after the fact. Like it's usually berserkers go in, do something great. Usually, I save them in a way that like will score me lots of points. I don't just throw them away. But then at that point, it's usually lights out for them. But that means that something else is surviving as well. So like it is a priority target for people, and those heroic intervenes with fight first in in those melee versus melee matchups are crucially good. His damage free is really great into a lot of things, and being able to snipe out enemy characters is just amazing. But you don't need him, not anymore, it seems. So the next list, let me just double check. Yeah, I've got the name. So this is Daniel Whitaker's list. He came third at Glasshammer. That was a super major. It was 160 plus people, and he came third with this list. Funny enough, I came 12th with the list I just showed before, but so he beat me out on that. So if you want to take that into account, you can. But this is the Forgefiend list. So this has started gaining popularity as well, and this is oh, we can use some shooting. World eaters don't need to be completely gunless or using just pistols and rhino shots. This list is interesting. Like, if I was to use this list, I'd probably tweak it a little bit, but that's my personal preference. He's gone for the Juggernaut with the helm. So this is basically saying I'm going to have this really tanky piece. It's not going to be the most deadly because of AP1, but can do mortars on a charge. It's good at cleaning up the screening units that opponents have because there's a lot of attacks and they're all damage too. So especially like killing like Space Marine scouts or like infiltrator units, he's very effective at doing that. And this one is a very tanky version. So whereas for my list, I usually hold him quite back and he's my like home field objective defender while my jackals go and run up the mid board. It seems that Dan uses this more as like an aggressive piece to sort of trade in the middle, hold objectives, and just be a threat to the opponent that I have to deal with. And it's not an easy model to deal with. 7 wounds, 2 up, 4 up, probably a 6 up, feel no pain, and half damage. Very tanky, very annoying to deal with for that small amount of points, and how effective he can be at clearing out the chaff of the opponent. We're looking at uh, 1 unit of jackals. This is probably to screen out the home field, sticky it. If the opponent's not got reserves coming in, you probably push up. You've got Forgefiends that can potentially sit close to home and push up with the jackals. I think that only having 1 unit of jackals and only 1 unit of chaos spawn feels very light on the scoring aspect, but this goes hard on hammer aspect with the 2 units of 6 exalted. And the Forgefiends, we have to talk about the Forgefiends. So Forgefiends are quite cheap at the moment for World Eaters. They have no strat support. The only support they can really get is if they're near Angron after turn 1, so from turn 2 onwards. If they're near Angron, they can get reroll hits. Because Angron's reroll aura starts in the charge phase, but does work in the shooting phase. It's reroll all hits, doesn't specify melee attacks. So Forgefiends are quite useful at dealing with those like Space Marine-ish screens. They could chip a few Terminators off here or there. They can apply some threat. Now, because they have some, they've got they're very good into larger units with blast, and they have can potentially battle shock stuff. So it's like, if you're going to be charging into a tough unit that you know is going to use a strat, like something like Fight on Death, for example, you can put a couple of Forge Fiends into it, and maybe you battle shock them, and suddenly they can't use that strat, and then suddenly you're safe to make that dangerous charge. So that can be quite a good swinging mechanic, and a little tactic to do. The other thing is, quite often I imagine you'll want to strat reserve one of the Forge Fiends, because I think the biggest problem with this is, yes, it forces people to hide, but I don't think it's hard to hide from Forge Fiends, especially on terrain sets like UKTC, where I think the Forge Fiends struggle movement wise to get around these buildings and get effective sight lines where you want them to, without just being shot and killed by the opponent. Because if you need to see them to shoot, they can see you back. So I think it's risking like having things exposed. So it's not an easy thing to pick up. Like it's not an easy list to use. I don't think. I think this is quite a technical list. Where you need to have the right positioning on your Forge Fiends and on your other models to sort of force the opponent to have to accept Forge Fiend damage. But the threat of Forge Fiends on the table will cause the opponent to play different, right? So if an opponent's playing against me, they don't need to worry about hiding in terrain. So my list previously, they don't need to worry about hiding behind walls or having any of their like squishy units that might be scared of a Forge Fiend, messing with them. Like or transports, let's say, because fortunately aren't bad into transports. They can definitely take some wounds off them, and maybe that's the tipping point that means that your first unit that charges into them, like an 8-bound unit, will kill the transport if it's already been weakened, especially if it gets to below half. Or it's I didn't quite finish off that stuff because I only had a couple of models left in my unit, but the Forge Fiend's still alive late game and can finish stuff off. They can stand on objectives and be effective across the board. Like there is definitely play there for them. But I do think that a good opponent will be able to just almost ignore them, accept the odd bit of chip damage here or there, and just push in aggressively against you because you have less other things on the board. Although 2 units of 6 Exalted Ain't Bound is a scary 2 blocks to deal with. They are surprisingly tanky, and they are hard. Like in the mirror match, I don't know how I would deal with some of this stuff. Like I would be probably ignoring the Forge Fiends, but getting through 2 blocks of 6 or 8-bound is not quick or easy. So yeah, I think the interesting about all of these lists, I think they're all good lists. Every list I'm going to show you, I think, has play and is very competitive and has the potential to win tournaments. And I think they all have different positive and negative matchups, or slightly more positive, slightly more negative matchups, in the sense of like this list will be better into sort of like a Dark Angels, which is very popular at the moment with like a few shooting units, because if they expose their shooting units to you, a Forge Fiend can chip some stuff off there, and then they lose their effectiveness. If they've got a big Hellblaster unit, that's not necessarily going to be easy for them because they're going to be trying to stay out of charge range from you and stuff. So they're going to be having to struggle with positioning with that unit, and this makes their positioning even harder, because if you get a Forge Fiend shot onto them, it's like, oh, that's a 10-man unit, so you're getting average 9 shots. If Angron's near it, you're looking at like 8 hits. That's a lot of potential models dead. That means that takes the oomph out of that squad, or like the Eradicator squad, right? Like if it jumps out to expose itself to shoot like at something, and then you like poke a Forge Fiend out, you can chip that off. Where it's a lot harder for a melee only army to force positional an extra layer of positional worry onto the opponent. Because obviously they have to worry about the positioning for charges, but yeah, it's an extra thing the opponent has to think about. So that's the Forge Fiends. The next one, this is a list that I'm considering running because it is just pure 8-bound like spam, right? Like, I mean, if you're looking at this effectively, what this between the last one is, it's very similar, but it's just more scoring units and more 8-pound, right? So swap out the two Forge Fiends for more scoring and more 8-pound. And I've put favored on the Juggernaut because that's I've got the more scoring units. I don't need to force them into the middle of the board to pressure, and it means that with all of my 8-bound, I can make sure I get that advance and charge on the turn. Because that's the balance of that. Like, do you want a tankier Lord on Juggernaut, or do you want a that more consistency on hitting the blessings you want to hit? And I'm a big fan of consistency. I think if you're consistently doing well, um, then or if you're not able, if you want to win like 5 games in a row, you need to be consistent, right? You can't have that bad game, or I didn't get advance and charge at the right time, or Angron didn't come back. I mean, it's one extra roll on trying to get Angron back, but that could make a massive difference in the game if he comes back that turn earlier or something like that. If he comes back turn 5, he's not effectively doing anything. If he comes back turn 4, he can do quite a lot. And it's never mind 3. But so this is more spawn, more jackals, and just like more 8-pound. This is my like, I'm going to get as aggressive as possible into your face. Like, I'm not talking about necessarily charging turn 1, but let me just throw out jackals and spawn into the mid board turn 1, stand on all those objectives, force you to come out to me, try and take those objectives off of it while I'm staging all of these 8-bound in the midfield. Probably put a 6-man exalted 8-bound in reserve to do a rapid ingress, because even like if you go into a position you can be shot a little bit because the footprint's a bit bigger than the 3-man, then but like you can just get into such crazy positions and get multi charges and all kinds of nonsense into, and it's such a big threat they have to worry about. And that rapid ingress, it's like, oh, I can rapid ingress and be like 15 inches away and I still have a 2-inch charge with rolling a normal-ish advance. So it's, you have so much flexibility there with that, and I do love how tanky a 6-man exalted 8-bound unit is. Quite often can take quite a chunk of shooting and then still have the 3 left. So having 2 of those. The only issue here I find is like it does feel like you don't have that much. You have the 5 8-bound units, it's fantastic, but and you have plenty of scoring stuff, but like if you come across something that 8-bound aren't good into, you're relying on Angron. So if we're talking about things like Catan or um, Deathwing Knights with the -1 damage, you're just having to put weight of bodies and attacks into them, which is not an ideal situation. Like this list into the 15 Deathwing Knights, I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible to get through it, but that's a lot of chewing through with only damage 1, and they've got 4 wounds on a 4-up inbun. Like, how many attacks do you really have? Like, that's a lot. You have to like 8 wounds from your models to kill 1. So to kill a 5-man unit, you'd need 40 wounds. An exalted 8-bound unit gets 6-man gets 36 attacks at best. And yeah, sustained hits, but that's, you're talking about like hitting all and wounding all and hitting extra. Like, you're not killing a unit with a 6-man exalted 8-bound unit. So yeah, I don't think that this list is amazing into the current meta, but who knows what, when things, balances change, this could be something that I'm pulling out of my pocket. Although I do need to build more exalted 8-bound. I've got them sat over there, just so I have this ready when I want to, because who doesn't love 8-pound, right? So one of the alternate options for this, though, as well, which I have looked at, is War Dogs. So there's been a lot of lists that have been written with War Dogs as allies. Brigands mostly in the past as that fire support. A lot of the same reasons that the Forgefiends work, but they were just a bit more expensive and didn't have any strat support, but didn't have any like blessings support. So that is the biggest issue with this. But like the carnivores are quite cheap. I think they're at 140 points at the moment, which yes is the same as the Forgefiends. So this is a slightly different list than than that. It's not just replace the Forge Fiends with Carnivores, because this once again is silly amounts of 8-bound. Is that the correct amount of 8-bound? That seems high. Just let me double check that. That's not meant to be 366. It's meant to be 336. Just fix that. Okay. So 3 less exalted 8-bound go into a carnivore. You lose the Lord, and that fits into another carnivore. So it's the main benefit of War Dogs are the OC, right? Like the an OC 8 single model is amazing. Like the War Dogs in Chaos Knights that can run through walls, like these carnivores are fast, so fast. They've got reroll to charge and they move 14 inches. If they can go through walls, they are incredibly good. These ones can't go through walls. So it makes it a little bit more awkward, especially on terrain sets that don't have like terrain you can move through, with vehicles like UKTC. But yeah, so they can be a bit blocked in and easily move blocked, but they are good little OC things. Like it's just going to go in, turn one, easily sort of run onto an objective, be ain't OC, and be a threat, and they're not easy to kill. They've got 12 wounds. They're quite it takes quite a commitment to remove them. And the other thing is, you can you're probably looking at strat reserving one of them at least, sort of rapid ingressing it in, and then running across the board, like I say, 14 inches. And because it's quite a tanky model, like if you rapid ingress in at a place where the opponent can see it, but they've not got any of their anti-tank in line of sight of them, then it's like, okay, this is a safe place to put it. And they are good in combat. They don't have strat support because they're allies, and they don't have blessings, but they hit on twos. They have a decent number of attacks depending on if they do sweep or smash. Their smash is quite effective into these things with like -1. So redemptors and Deathwing Knights, they were the -1 damage. These can still pack a punch into. They're still a threat to, and that's, I think, one of the big elements of this that I think is really favorable, and why this why I've put this list in here. It's a I think once again we're looking at those 4 scoring units, right? You've got the Jackals, you've got the Spawn. Jackals are great screening. They stick objectives. You sort of string them out, scout them with Invocatus. All of these lists have Invocatus in. All of these lists have Angron in. These are staples, right? These are always going to be there and are always worth taking. The extra bits, I mean, they've also all got 8-bound, they've all got exalted 8-bound, and they've all got some form of jackals and slash spawn. It's this is what we're looking for from a list. So if you're trying to figure out what your competitive list is going to be, these are the spins on the what I consider the meta list to be. I think you've got some like crucial building block. And you can back. So yeah, the list sort of the first like 1,500-ish writes itself. You need these good amounts of scoring units. You want to push them out onto the objectives early, force the opponent to react, especially if you can get them onto objectives in hidden positions that forces them to even come further out. It's okay if the opponent can see you, as long as they have to expose themselves to threats for the rest. If you can retaliate and you're not losing anything precious in them seeing you, it's like that's perfect. If they have to force themselves out, I'll probably do a video in future on deployment and like first term positioning. But yeah, these are the lists that I'm working with, the ones I'm looking at, the ones I'm considering when going to tournaments. I mean, if you've got other lists that you think I've completely overlooked, I'm sure the Hellbrute crew will come after me for not including it, and I'm sure everyone has seen, every World Eater player has seen that a Helldrake won a GT recently. But trust me, that is not the path you want to take. That was mostly someone trolling, um, or a couple, more than one person trolling, basically. The Yeah, like no one seriously thinks that the Helldrake should be in a top list. Um, but yeah, so please get in touch. Comment. Please give this a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. If you made it this far, hit me up, and I will like personally thank you. The I do have to quickly just shout out the sponsors. We've got Glasshammer Gaming, a fantastic sponsor of the channel. If you use code Black Crow at checkout for anything, literally anything on their store. So we're talking about like event tickets, models, paints, whatever you're buying off their store, you get 5% extra discount on top of whatever there is already on there using code Black Crow. And Terrain Forge make great terrain if you want to practice your deployments and stuff at home, or you have regular games with other people and you want to expand out to different types of terrain. Please go check out Terrain Forge. They are fantastic. The code is BCG5 for 5% off discount there as well. Other than that, please hit me up with suggestions for what you'd like to see in future videos. And thank you for watching this one. Cheers.